Hey there, welcome to episode 85 of the Social Business Engine podcast. This is the podcast where I invite thought leaders from all industries who are excited to share with you, the modern business executive, how to harness social media in your business strategy. I'm Bernie Borges, CEO of Find and Convert, and your host of the Social Business Engine podcast. On today's episode, you're going to meet Mary Elizabeth Miller, IBM Verse UX designer, and Duncan Hopkins, Senior Design Team Lead, IBM Design, Enterprise Social Solutions. We've published a social business journal issue with IBM that addresses the strategically important topic, inclusive design in a cognitive era, reinventing enterprise email to make workplaces more productive, efficient, and humane. Now, this journal is available for download at our website at socialbusinessengine.com/journals. In other words, it's the journals page on our website. Or you can visit our show notes page on our website for this episode for a link to download this journal. And if you're subscribed by email to get our weekly podcast episodes, which we send every Friday, this journal will show up in your inbox. And if you're not subscribed to get our weekly updates by email, just visit our subscribe page at our website, socialbusinessengine.com. And now, here's my interview with Emmy Miller and Duncan Hopkins from IBM. Emmy and Duncan, welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast.
Hi, Bernie. Happy to be here.
Hi, how are you?
Terrific. Well, thank you. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. Well, let's get right to it. The reason that we're here to have this conversation is because you all are working on some really exciting, have been working on some really exciting technologies that addresses some things that are going on in the workplace. You know, I've been around for a while, and I remember the traditional workplace being very different as we know it today. In fact, I would even say the traditional workplace doesn't even exist anymore. We've seen the explosion of social, mobile, and cloud technologies, and it's just changed the way that we work. And more changes are coming fast. We've seen employee behaviors that are challenging traditional communication and traditional collaboration processes as more and more employees are working remotely. And millennials are overtaking the workforce. In fact, I read somewhere recently that in the next 5 years, millennials will make up as much as 50% of the workforce. And I read recently that business leaders like your IBM chairman and CEO, Ginny Rometty, envisions an age where our oceans of unstructured data become meaningful thanks to the power of digital learning and where business processes become increasingly cognitive. Now, that is really ambitious. So, with all of these fast-moving realities upon us, let's begin our conversation, Emmy and Duncan, with this question. Why is design so important in all aspects of the applications that we use in the workplace?
Well, thanks, Bernie. I would say that good design is a great experience for everybody. Consumer applications today really influence how enterprise users use their software. People, go home and use all kinds of different things on their computers, on their laptops, phones, and they're so used to this, this great experience that really influences how the enterprise is adapting and designing software, for this new workforce, and it's extremely important.
Yeah, and Bernie, with us working on social software, design is extremely important for people's productivity. How you design a product can strongly impact people's ability to be able to do their job when you're thinking about social enterprise software. And so we want to make sure that when we're designing the best experience for users so that they can do their job and be more efficient, because we know that ability directly is related to the profit of a company. So it's extremely important. Bernie, I know that we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I want to go ahead and touch on it because I believe that, designing for accessibility is extremely important as well, because if you don't design for accessibility, you don't design inclusively for these very varying disabilities, the tool that you create actually will prevent people from being able to do their job. And so it becomes an issue with the tool and not the person's ability. So thinking about all these things through the design process directly relates to a person's ability to really be efficient and do their job correctly.
So, Emmy and Duncan, what I hear you both saying is that a couple of points that you made there that I find really compelling and interesting. One is that as consumers, we use apps and software on a variety of different devices. And then if we go to work and we work in a corporate setting and we're using some kind of a enterprise application, we want to have a similar experience. That's one point that I heard. And then the other point that you just made, Emmy, is about the importance of designing for accessibility for varying disabilities. So can we talk a little bit more about each of those? Because I think both of those are really relevant points that can impact so many people.
Yeah, for sure. And you playing back what we were just talking about, it really made me think about IBM Design's motto that we follow, which is works the same, works together, and works for me. So really all that's about people in this day and age with technology being so pervasive and across all of our devices, people expect and have this certain expectation of how things should work. They expect things to work similarly and together, and are expecting great experiences across devices. And in designing social software for the enterprise, we have to take all of that into consideration.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be a different experience when you go and you're going from your home to your car to your work. Those should all be the same experience, and you should all love using the software that you have to work with, and especially in the work environment where you have to use that 8 hours a day or so. You want to be able to have a great experience while you're doing that. It shouldn't be any different.
Right. So then, how can organizations rethink their business practices? When they engage in a global talent pool, it's very competitive, and they've got to manage employees that can be distributed teams. How can they organize around these practices, these business practices, based on these trends?
IBM, of course, is extremely distributed. We have a huge global talent pool that we work with. Our team alone is, I don't know, about 4 or 5 locations, and that maybe more than that, globally.
And that's the design team, Duncan?
The design team, but then we also have developers that are also all over the world as well.
Right.
So, we collaborate and work on a global level every day.
What's really important to IBM Design thinking is the places that we work and creating these collaborative places. So we've created studios in which supports collaboration with people. We have whiteboards that you can slide. You can easily take them down and reconfigure a room. All of our spaces are open, so it makes it a lot easier. When you're sitting next to somebody, you can just turn to them and talk to them. So we've put in a lot of effort with our studios. Me and Duncan are here in the Austin studio, which was our first studio with IBM Design, but we are building our studios across the globe. So we're reaching about 25 studios worldwide. We're hiring people with great talent, and we're trying to place the focus on people in our day-to-day work, and humanize the enterprise in that process. And then we also have practices that we follow. So that comes down to the methodology of IBM design thinking. And, that methodology is all about collaboration across 3 core disciplines with what we do within software, which is, design, development, and product management, in which we help to define the goals and missions with something that we call HILs. We are also trying to work one-on-one with sponsor users, to envision the user experience so that way we get direct feedback from our end users, throughout our process. And then our third core practice that we try to follow is doing playbacks with our stakeholders and with our sponsor users so that we make sure that we're aligned and we're always following the mission of our HILs that we've defined from the beginning. So at IBM, with those three areas of people, practices, and places, that really equals outcomes. And so that's been our process with IBM Design. And we are trying, we are implementing that across all of our our product teams to improve how we collaborate.
Yeah, and right now, I mean, I think we are the largest company doing design thinking at scale that no one's attempted at this point. And we're probably going to be the largest design team globally.
Wow, that's impressive. So let's come back up 10,000 feet and actually put a definition to IBM design thinking, because you've just both done a really terrific job of explaining what it is. But there's a reason that IBM actually implemented this whole process. Do you want to elaborate on that reason?
Sure. IBM is a massive company, right? And design thinking has existed for a long time. It's an existing concept. And really design thinking without the IBM part is all about collaboration across those three areas that I was mentioning. So you have a cross-discipline team. And then it's also about following an iterative process where you're constantly trying to understand, ideate, prototype, and evaluate. And you're constantly doing any of those four phases in any kind of order. And what makes IBM design thinking unique was the three core practices that I mentioned earlier, which are hills, sponsor users, and playbacks. And the reason why we have implemented that within IBM design thinking is so that we can do it at scale. So, within a company like IBM, this addition of the three core practices helps us to do that at a company this large.
Awesome. Now, all of this feeds right into your exciting launch of IBM Verse, right? So can we talk about, first of all, what is IBM Verse? What are the business challenges that you focused on when you designed and launched as you're trying to solve with this design product?
Sure. So IBM Verse is a lot of people think of it as just a mail application, but it's a lot more than that. It's a software application that brings together mail, social analytics into a single collaborative environment. It has some built-in analytics that we use to bring to the surface what is important to you as a user. We could talk about this being cognitive, but at a high level, it's really about what is important to you as a user, and what do you need to focus on during the day to get your work done. And that could be things like needs, what you need as far as needs action, some items you've got going on, meetings that you're going to be attend, what is going to be important to that meeting, who are the right people to invite, what are the files that you need for that meeting, and really making it a better work experience for the user and a new way to work. And it's part of this collaborative effort within the environment.
New way to work. Love that.
Exactly.
I've seen that hashtag around.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So can you speak to what kind of feedback you're getting from users of IBM Verse?
The feedback that we've been getting about Verse is that it is a much simpler UI and easier to use. And so people are pretty attracted to our elegant interface. One thing that we've done in IBM Verse that's pretty unique is we've implemented a faceted search, which is really, really nice user experience because it really helps people to find their email, within seconds, which we know can be difficult in this day and age with the information overload that people have.
That's an understatement, Emmy.
I know, right? I think that there's a statistic out there that out of all of the email you get, only 14% are urgent. So you can imagine the noise that we get on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no kidding. So elegant interface, it's got a search capability, it's easy to use. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but anyone can use this, right? I mean, you can just sign on, just log into the website and sign up, right?
That's right, Bernie. There's a freemium version. So you can go to our website for IBM Verse and you can access an account and we'll give it to you.
And that website is?
Yeah, so the site to go to would be ibm.com/verse, and you can go sign up for a freemium version.
Terrific. So let's come back to the accessibility topic, because we touched on that earlier, and I wanted to spend a little more time on it. As you alluded to, Emmy, I had planned on covering that with you because it is an important topic. So let's come back and just talk a little bit about what does it mean when you say that you've made accessibility an integral function of the overall IBM design thinking process?
Well, Bernie, our approach to accessibility is just like any other kind of design problem. And, my process of designing for accessibility, I've found that, where you really have to start is by understanding the user and developing empathy for the user, which is all a part of IBM design thinking. And so, using that and going through our typical design thinking process, that's how we start to implement accessibility. And so it's our goal at IBM Design to do that all the way from the beginning of the process. So the idea is that you are constantly incorporating accessibility into your designs and constantly planning for it, and that it's just a part of the design process that you do every day. And so that's what we've been doing.
Awesome. And what kind of feedback are you getting on that from users?
Well, we're still in the development phase, and we're still going through the process. One of the things that's so important here, Bernie, about accessibility is that we're trying to make one experience that works for everyone. So it's not like a second experience for somebody with disability.
That's a great point, Emmy. I'm really glad you made that point. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's one interface, so when you go into the interface, you don't have to turn on anything special to use the interface. For accessibility, we try to make it a seamless experience, and it's not an easy thing to do, and then make it so that it's visually pleasing and aesthetically usable by everybody and taken all into consideration. So I just want to give kudos out to Emmy and the team that have been working on this, because it's been an extremely important problem to solve, and means a lot to everybody here. But it's not necessarily easy to come out with something that looks and works that simply for everybody.
Sure. Can you comment on how you're applying this to IBM Verse?
For accessibility, when you're designing for it and thinking about it, there's 4 major disabilities that we look at, and in particularly we focused on mostly 2, which is vision and physical disabilities. The other 2 major types of disabilities are cognitive and hearing. We don't incorporate too much sound within our UI, so our focus has mostly been on vision and physical disabilities. So what that means is that a user with a range, there can be any kind of range of disabilities. For vision, you could have somebody that's colorblind, or you could have somebody that's completely blind or low vision. And there's different types of assistive technologies people use. So some people with low vision might be zooming their screen in to 200%, or they might be using a high contrast mode. So you kind of the whole process is understanding what assistive technologies people are using, how they're using it, and then how your design works with that. And then just, creating a design that will work with all of these different scenarios and ensuring that it's a good experience in all of those cases. And it doesn't mean that we create a separate design. We try to create a design that meets all of those needs in one area. And as a UX designer, what's really important to think about is how a keyboard user would be using the user interface. So keyboard user could be somebody, well, it's also blind users, but it could be somebody with a physical disability so that they, have full vision and are able to view the UI, but are not able to use a mouse. So they're using the keyboard to navigate the UI. As you could imagine, you need to design that experience for a keyboard user the same as you have to design an experience for a mouse user, and it just needs to be considered at the same time, which is why we're trying to kind of bake accessibility into the process rather than bolting it on at the end. That way, it's all incorporated and works for everyone. And another thing that we've been doing recently is baking it into our design language. So incorporating accessibility into the visuals. Recently, we've been focused on our keyboard focus states, incorporating a system into our UI so that there's some consistency across the UI and how it looks visually. It's pretty pleasant to all users because I also want to point out that, every user will use the keyboard within a user experience. So, we really want it to focus on that.
Okay. So, Emmy and Duncan, what IBM is doing with design thinking is clearly visionary. And even in the report that I read, the Forrester report, which I know we haven't mentioned yet, but I know that we're going to make that available. And in a moment here, we'll call out the name of that report and how people can get access to that, where it describes the IBM design thinking process. And I was really fascinated to read that from cover to cover. But the report also says that it's going to be a rising tide thing. Other companies around the world, enterprises around the world are going to adopt a similar methodology and philosophy. So why don't we talk a little bit about how can other companies apply design thinking across their business to embrace a new way to work?
Well, I think a good example would be going to look at the IBM.com design language site, and we've laid it out there for a lot of people to use, not just besides IBM, but we've really put it out there so that other people can adopt it and use it at scale. I think we've got it. What we've got is a really solid experience for how people can do this.
Excellent. So, Emmy and Duncan, I have a question for you regarding this process of designing for people with disabilities. If you yourself are not disabled in any way, how do you put yourself in the shoes of someone who needs the accessibility that you want to design into the product?
Bernie, I'm really happy that you asked that question because there was a very impactful experience that I had when I first started here at IBM Design. And when I first came here, I was part of a boot camp for new hires coming into IBM right out of college. And during that time, we had a week where we focused on accessibility. And we brought in experts from IBM within our accessibility group to talk about what accessibility means to design. And when they did that, the leaders of this workshop themselves were disabled. Firsthand, I got to see somebody using a screen reader on their laptop, also interacting with the voiceover on their cell phone. Screen readers have a speed in which they read. So I believe that, the rate that a person normally would listen to a screen reader is about at 33%. Somebody who is constantly used to listening to a UI and experiencing a UI through a screen reader will listen to it up to like 75%, which is extremely fast. And it was extremely impactful to hear that because, me experiencing that for the first time, I was overwhelmed. I was like, wow, how could you ever be able to do anything, just using the screen reader? Because I had never experienced that. And it's always stuck with me. So when I talk about accessibility with designers, I always recommend that they go out and look at YouTube videos of people using assistive technologies and understanding how that impacts their experience, with viewing a UI or going through a UI. And so that's always been my suggestion. I know here also at IBM Design in our IBM Design Camp, we're constantly improving the educational series around accessibility. And one of the things that we have recently been doing is having an activity where the new hires are using goggles that will augment and change their vision and affect the way that they're able to see the screen. And so, that experience of being able to see other people experience a UI or using things that helps put you in a person's shoe with low vision or a different types of disability is extremely impactful.
Wow. Yeah, I can see how that must have been very impactful, probably even emotional to experience that firsthand.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I could also add, Bernie, that even besides the IBM Design campers, we are also within our team doing continual accessibility training, and that's not just for the designers. We're opening it up to developers and managers and anybody, so that everyone can experience and understand what it really means to use these interfaces and how important this is to be inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was reading in the Forrester case study about how as you were rolling out the IBM design thinking methodology, that this new language was really beginning to take shape throughout the organization. So the training expanded, and it included executives coming into the IBM Design Thinking Center and actually going through some training themselves to actually get integrated into the culture and the methodology and the terminology.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to attempt to summarize some key takeaways from our conversation here today. And I say attempt because we covered so much ground. And of course, in a moment, we're going to explain where some of these resources are available online. But really, the main points we covered today, Emmy and Duncan, are how good design is really something that just provides a good experience for everybody, regardless of what they're using and where they're using it. And design for accessibility, as we've spent considerable time discussing, is just extremely important for all users, and that design for accessibility is really kind of baked into your design methodology for your products. And of course, we spent considerable time talking about IBM Verse and how it flows out of the IBM design thinking methodology. And of course, your IBM design motto. I love that. It works together, works the same, and works for me. So everything flows from that motto. And that your IBM design thinking is something that's very cross-discipline, across people, practices, and places. And you've got methodologies that uses hills and direct feedback and playbacks. And of course, there's elaboration on that in the Forrester report that we're going to make available in just a moment here to our listeners. And then in discussing IBM Verse, which is a really exciting, still fairly new offering from IBM, where it provides mail, social, analytics into one collaborative environment and can really make email a whole lot easier to use and more productive to use. And really, in the end, this all comes together to, again, just make all of us in the workplace, it's a new way to work. It's just a new way for us to collaborate and be more productive in this digital connected age where we're all kind of facing the same challenge of information overload. Do you have anything to add or anything that I left out as takeaways from our conversation?
I think you did a great job of covering everything. I couldn't have said it better myself.
My last question, Emmy and Duncan, is what I call my one thing question. And I like to have a little bit of fun with this, but it's really for the listener. And that is what's one thing that you would really like to leave the listeners with that you could advise them as an actionable takeaway from this conversation today?
You know what, Bernie, I think you summarized it perfectly, but I just want to close with pointing out that I think that IBM design thinking can really be applied to anything that you're doing if you're trying to solve a problem. And, today we gave you examples how we did that for IBM Verse and how we did that with designing for accessibility. Anybody can truly do this using our practice of IBM design thinking. And you had mentioned it earlier. We do have a Forrester case study that was published in September this year, 2015. And the name of that publication is IBM Builds a Design-Driven Culture at Scale. I believe we'll make it available on your website.
Absolutely. We will link that up on our show notes page. But if there's a link online that you want to send people to, by all means, let's mention it right now.
You could also find this link on Twitter at our Twitter handle, IBM Design. You can find this link there, and you also can follow, what we're doing here at IBM Design.
Awesome. So once again, that is a case study from Forrester. The title of it is IBM Builds a Design-Driven Culture at Scale. And it's available on Twitter at IBM Design. And of course, we will also link it up on our show notes at socialbusinessengine.com.
That's right.
Terrific. Emmy and Duncan, any place else you'd like to send people online to learn more about you or anything we discussed here today?
Well, if you ever want to learn more about me, my Twitter handle is Emmy Miller ID. And then I also have a personal website, which is maryelizabethmiller.com. You can find my contact information there and follow me on Twitter.
My Twitter handle is at Duncanistan. It's DUNCANISTAN. And I also have a website that is Duncanistan.com as well.
All right, terrific. Well, my listeners know that we will link all that up in our show notes page at socialbusinessengine.com. So, Emmy and Duncan, thank you so much for joining me here today. It's really been exciting to talk about IBM's approach to building a design-driven culture at scale. It's really what this whole conversation has been about, and the impact that it's having on enterprise and on people, just people as humans, people as workers, just all of us. So thank you so much for joining me here today.
Great. Thanks, Bernie.
Thank you.
And of course, I want to remind everybody that we have published a social business journal with IBM that addresses this important topic, inclusive design in a cognitive era, and how it has reinvented enterprise email to make workplaces more productive, efficient, and humane. This journal is available for download at our website at socialbusinessengine.com/journals, or you can just visit our show notes page on our website for this episode for a link to download this journal. And if you're subscribed by email to get our weekly podcast updates, which we send every Friday, this journal is going to show up in your inbox. And if you're not subscribed to our weekly updates by email, just visit our subscribe page at our website, socialbusinessengine.com. And hey, if you're a regular listener to the Social Business Engine podcast, first of all, thank you. And if this is your first time listening to this podcast, I hope you enjoyed it. I know I have. And that you'll push the subscribe button on your podcast player so that you don't miss future episodes. And if you're an iTunes subscriber, I would be very grateful if you would write a review for this podcast to help others discover it. We have a direct link to this podcast on iTunes. Just go to socialbusinessengine.com/iTunes. And lastly, I invite you to engage with me on Twitter at Bernie Borges and our podcast at SB Engine. And we also have a Facebook page, which is appropriately named facebook.com/socialbusinessengine. And of course, follow our hashtag across just about every social media channel, including Instagram, and that's SBE Show. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I want to thank my guests again, M.E. Miller, IBM Verse UX designer, and Duncan Hopkins, Senior Design Team Lead, IBM Design Enterprise Social Solutions. This is Bernie Borges of Find and Convert, wishing you continued success on your social business journey.